Sporting Journal Radio, presented by Onyx.
All right, now we're going to check in with Joe Henry from Lake of the Woods Tourism to find out how people are catching fish up at Lake of the Woods. Joe, we're into that mid-June summer. We've had some nice warm temperatures now for a little while. We're finally into maybe getting into those summer patterns a little bit. What if you were headed to Lake of the Woods right now, what would you fill your tackle box with?
Oh, man. They're biting so good you could catch them on a hot dog. If I was going to Lake of the Woods right now, I'll tell you what. And I normally have a few things in my tackle box anyway, as you saw. But
hot dogs? Do you keep hot dogs in there?
I probably should, because every once in a while I get a little hungry in the water. Normally the sandwiches for me, but I say hot dogs just because I said that one time. I said, "Shoot, they're biting so good you catch them on hot dogs," and somebody says, "We do. We fish hot dogs on tip-ups for pike, and we catch them all the time on Lake of the Woods."
I've done that. It's worked.
And
fun dogs.
And that's exactly right too. They always say the cheaper the better. The great value dogs, the fun dogs, the more fat the better. But we'll save that for ice fishing. You asked me what would I bring up, and it'd be three things, Brett. It would be I'd have some jigs. I'd have some good Lake of the Woods colored jigs, or I'd pick some up when I'm up there. Tom's Tackle is one of the companies that makes jigs for Lake of the Woods. There's other great jig companies too, obviously, but they make some really good Lake of the Woods colors. One of my favorites is the front part of the head is pink, then it's got a strip of glow white, and then the back of the jig is gold. The whole jig is gold, it's painted. That's a good one. The other ones I like are the ones that are like the front of the jig is dipped in like either orange or chartreuse, and the back half of the jig is gold. Those are good jigs on Lake of the Woods. So I'd bring jigs. The other thing I would bring is spinners. So I'd bring some 2-ounce bottom bouncers and some crawler harnesses, or pick them up north, and pull spinners with a crawler on it. Pinch that crawler off so you got about 2 or 3 inches off that back hook. Pull that around a little bit. You're going to get bit. You could also take and pull minnows around, or leeches too, on a spinner to try something different. And then thirdly, crankbaits. You know what? Those crankbaits, man, I'll tell you, this time of year, those crankbaits covering water. I can tell you, I know people right now that are just going out in the evening. They're working at the resorts or whatever, or maybe they're locals, and they're going out by Pine Island and both on the front and back side of Pine, they're just pulling crankbaits, shad wrap or whatever, and they're catching a pile of walleyes. So, and those crankbaits too, I mean, when you get out to deeper waters, way offshore, where a lot of those walleyes and saugers are living, now you just have to get those crankbaits down to where the fish are living. So, if a shad style bait goes down, let's say 8 feet or 10 feet, and you're fishing in 25 feet of water, you might have to use a bottom bouncer to get them down, or a weight, or lead core line, or whatever. But the bottom line is find a way to get those cranks down to those fish, and you're going to get some action.
That is maybe the most important part of that, regardless of what you're using. I mean, you can catch some suspended fish, but 90% of the time, I think you have to be right down on the bottom or right near it.
95% of the time I like the Woods. I've seen those fish suspended before. I fish tournaments and I guide stuff. I've seen those fish suspended. I've caught them a few times, but I'll tell you, most of the time you see those fish suspended, they're not real good eaters. We normally, I don't want them to do anything. I don't want to say any norms for walleyes, because then they break your norms and they fool you. But as a rule, I can tell you over the years, those fish in the bottom bite better than those suspended fish on Lake of the Woods. Other lakes, it's not that way. Other lakes, they'll catch the heck out of the suspended fish. But on Lake of the Woods, you want to be targeting those bottom fish overall.
And I noticed one thing last year when we were up there pulling spinners is, first of all, depending on how many people you got in the boat, if you've got multiple people, you all have to be using something that's going to get you in contact with the bottom. Now, you can use different sizes of weights or bottom bouncers so that you're not tangling each other up, this and that. But we found actually 3-ounce bottom bouncers ended up working better for us last year while we were up there.
Well, I think what the kicker is this. When I say a 2-ounce bouncer, the reason I normally say 2 ounces is because you can use that effectively in 5 feet of water all the way down to about 30. Now, if you know that you're going to be in 25 to 35 feet of water a good part of the time, well, then going with a 3-ounce bouncer makes a lot of sense, because it's easier to maintain that contact with the bottom. The walleyes don't care if it's 3 ounces. They don't care if it's 4 ounces. I mean, I know a lot of anglers up there that they'll use a 4-ounce bottom bouncer in a 6-foot piece of monofilament line, and then a shallow diving crankbait, and they'll troll that near the bottom. It's a very inexpensive, easy, but effective way to target walleyes in that deeper water.
My buddies give me a hard time sometimes because I'll use a heavier jig, but I just want to be on the bottom. I just want to make sure that I'm on the bottom. I've used something way too light too many times where I've wasted time not being able to get down there, that I just want to be able to feel that bottom down there and make sure I'm down where the fish are. And especially if you're running like a 6-foot leader off there, that is, invisible for those fish. The weights aren't bothering them at all.
It's not. They're not, especially in that stained water. On top of it, it's stained water, so they're less sensitive that way. When we talk about pulling a 4-ounce bottom bouncer with a crankbait, for instance, we say use a shallow diving crank. And the reason for that is if you'd put like a regular shad wrap on, you have that bottom bouncer down by the bottom, and then on top of that crank's going to dive down below it, and you're going to hit the bottom. If you have that shallow diving crank, it's going to be just kind of following true or a little bit above the bottom bouncer, so it works out real nice. But you talk about using bigger jigs. On Lake of the Woods, number one, for people that don't fish a lot, it helps you maintain that bottom contact, which is really good. It overcomes some wind and waves if you're not used to it. And then the fish like that too, because you can thump that bottom, and that's almost like a dinner bell. You thump that bottom and lift it up. When they come in that stained water, they get a little bit of bigger profile. Heck, I know some guides that prefer using bigger jigs just because they think that they catch more fish on bigger jigs on Lake of the Woods. Maybe they do.
Sure. Go big or go home. I want the big fish.
Big straight.
Well,
when I would fish, when I fish tournaments, and I probably said this on the air before, but I would use what I would call a full meal deal. And I'd take a jig and I'd put a plastic, like a Berkeley Alive shiner minnow, emerald shiner. I'd hook that on my jig. Then I'd take a stinger hook and put a stinger hook on there so I have a little treble just a couple inches behind. And then I'd put a frozen emerald shiner on there. And then on that little treble hook, there's 3 little hooks to the treble, right? I'd break a minnow in half, and I'd put half a minnow on one treble, a half a minnow on the second treble, and I'd put a piece of worm on the third treble, and I'd put a piece of worm on top of the whole shiner. And it's just a lump of whatever. Well, then I got corrected by a friend of mine who's a local guide up there. He goes, "No, that's not a full meal deal. That's only 2/3. You forgot a leech."
So let's call that the kitchen sink.
But what would happen is, I think, those bigger walleyes, I was targeting bigger walleyes in tournaments, and those bigger walleyes would come in and see a larger profile, which was intriguing to them. But the other thing was cool is that if I'd get a bite and set the hook and miss that fish, well, normally your bait disintegrates off. You got to come up and rebait, which is hard to do because you got that hot fish down there. That fish is ready to eat. Well, when I had that plastic on there, it's round 2. I can drop that plastic still on my hook. That doesn't go anywhere. I can jig that in front of that fish that just bit and usually catch them,
Well, Joe, if people want to go up and try these tips and techniques at Lake of the Woods, how do they plan a trip?
Oh, absolutely. Check out our Facebook and Instagram pages at Lake of the Woods Tourism. Otherwise, check out our website, and that's, lakeofthewoodsmn.com.
Hear more at sportingjournalradio.com or wherever you get podcasts. Northern Minnesota's Walleye Factory is a year-round world-class fishing destination. The perfect getaway this summer is just a short drive to Lake of the Woods. Fish Big Traverse Bay, the Rainy River, or visit the unique Northwest Angle. To catch big fish, you have to go where the big fish are. Plan your trip to Lake of the Woods at lakeofthewoodsmn.com. That's lakeofthewoodsmn.com.